What's going on YouTube? Just want to go over how I use Excel as a data analyst. I know there's lots of different types of data analysts, so what I go over isn't going to cover everything, just what I do on a day-to-day basis. My job really just encompasses reconciling invoices, so comparing what we have in our inventory to what we're getting billed for. So just ensuring that, if we're getting billed for 10 users, that we have 10 active users and we're not getting overbilled or there's no billing errors, because those things do happen sometimes. Um, so, and to note, this data here is not that of my clients. I got it from the City of Phoenix public site. Um, so it's not like it's confidential or anything like that. To start, the data is always going to come like this with your columns as your categories and then all your entries as rows. If you want to get a cleaner look of this, you can go ahead and highlight the whole sheet, double click the columns. Now you've got all your columns spaced out well so you can read everything. And then if you want to quickly filter these columns, you can go and hit Control Shift L. It's going to add the filters. Just be sure that you're in an active cell along the headers. You don't want to be like in a cell down here, because it's going to start the filters at that row. Now you can go ahead and filter by vendors if you need to, or whatever you need to filter by. Quick ways to like navigate just your data set is using just holding control. You can come to the end of the data. So like if I hit control down, it's going to take me all the way to the bottom, control up all the way back to the top, control left all the way to the left, and so on. If you hold control shift, it's going to start highlighting, so you can use that same way to highlight the whole data set really fast. And as long as you don't have extra stuff on the side, and a lot of the times the Excel spreadsheets we work with never do, but if you want to well, what we use a lot is pivot tables. So when you want to make a pivot table with this data, you don't actually have to highlight it. You can go ahead and just be anywhere in the table, hit insert pivot table, and Excel is going to already pick up the table that you want to pivot. Obviously you can adjust it, but it's usually really good about figuring out the data set. So we hit OK. And this is where pivot tables can get a little confusing, trying to figure out what values to put where. So the way we kind of go about it is dollar amounts. Since we're usually just working with invoices, we usually want dollar amounts in values. Vendor names, user names, really like any kind of names or descriptions we'll have in rows. And then we'll usually do time periods in the columns. So here we have like payment date, but this is for August, so it's really just going to be every day of August, which is not clean, so it's not really helpful. But sometimes on like bigger periods, like months, it might be cleaner if you're, let's say, looking at an invoice for the first quarter, right? January, February, March, and you can split it up into columns of January, February, and March. Then that might be a little helpful, especially when you're trying to figure out where discrepancies are between inventories and invoices. So, but for this one, we're not going to use the columns. The nice thing about using the pivot tables is if you do find discrepancies, it's pretty simple to go about figuring out where they take place. So if there's something wrong here, then I can go ahead and double click into it, and it's going to give me a breakdown of the total charges for that total cost. Give me the item name, the description, payment date, all that, so I can really track down like where and when the discrepancy took place. So that makes the pivot tables really useful in that way. The next thing that we do a lot is use the VLOOKUP function. So and I brought in July's data because usually we'll use this to look up against what we have in inventory. I'm just going to use this to look up against July as an example. So VLOOKUP, I want to look up the vendor name. That's my lookup value. And the table array I'm going to find in this July tab. And actually, real quick, let me put July in a pivot table because that's usually how we do it as well. It makes it a lot easier because it's easier when the tables look similar. So vendor name in the rows, net amounts. Cool. So now, table looks pretty similar. And go ahead and go back here. VLOOKUP. I want to look up this value, vendor name, into sheet 4. And you can either highlight the columns like this. That usually works fine. You can go ahead and highlight them using the Control Shift. Now I've highlighted all the data. And now, comma. I want to look up, my column index is going to be column 2. So the second column. And another comma, and it's true, match. Okay, so obviously One Stop Electronics is not in July. But if we filter down for all the data, you see we got some vendors. If again I want to filter by the values I do have, I can go ahead and just unselect all the NAs. Now I've got, I got values, I got actual values that are actually related to the invoices. So now I can start looking for discrepancies. Why is the billing so low for August compared to July? And we can, go into that now. The thing with the VLOOKUPs is you just have to make sure that whatever value you're looking up, that the data set that you're looking in, that the leftmost column has your lookup value. So that's the big thing about VLOOKUPs. You can't. So let's assume you had another column here of just random data. All right, random data. Fill it all the way down. And you tried doing that same VLOOKUP. So we'll go ahead and unfilter this. Delete the data. Take off the filter. We will look up vendor name. Come back here. And let's say we try to look up the data like that. Right now we've included column A. Our vendor names are still here, but we've now included column A to C. And then we go comma. Now we want column 3, because it's the third column now, the invoice total. But now we've returned nothing. We get nothing at all. And that's because the VLOOKUP is going to look in the leftmost column. And since A is our leftmost column, it's going to look for in these values. And obviously no vendor names are going to be in here. So you have to make sure that when you're using the VLOOKUP, you select first the values that you're actually going to be looking through. So you could have column A here, but don't include that in your table array. Just column B, column C. Cool. Now column 2 is what I want to look through because that's in our table array. Now if I filter all the way down again, I got my values again. Last thing I wanted to cover was just something I learned along the way actually that was super helpful. So sometimes usernames are just email addresses, which sometimes they're not always like that for inventory or invoices. Like you might have an invoice that uses the email as a username, but in our inventory we don't use the email. So for example, let's just say we have this kind of email, right? And this one. And this one. Now all I care about is what's in front, right? So let's say what's in front of the asterisk is what I have in my inventory. So I want to look up just that. So how can I separate that, right, in an efficient way? So I can go ahead and highlight it, go to data, text to columns. Now it's going to give you this convert text to columns wizard. We use delimited, and we can go ahead and come to other, or if it's a semicolon or comma, you can check those, but we're going to use the asterisk. Now you can see it's separating wherever it has that. Now I can go ahead and go next, and I want to include this, so general format is fine with me. I don't care about this column, so I will go ahead and put do not import, and it won't import that. Now I'm only left with what's in front, which is all I care about, which can be super helpful when you have data that has information that you don't really need. So you can go ahead and split that up and just take what you do need. So I think that's it for all that I wanted to go over. If you do have any questions or want to see any other kind of Excel videos, let me know. I have dealt with macros or other functions too. I use this for my own personal things too. So if you do have any questions or want to see anything certain, let me know, and I can go ahead and go through some things. But thank you for watching, and I hope it helped.